Welcome to Voice with Vielka, the podcast dedicated to the ongoing quest for finding how to best teach kids to sing with confidence. I'm your host, Vielka, and I'll share my experiences as a performer, educator, founder, and mother for the last 20 years here in the heart of New York City. Thank you for joining me as I share with you the amazing people, practices, and talking points to help us grow together as singers, educators, entrepreneurs, and human beings. Welcome to Voice with Vielka. I am so excited to have you here with me, and not just me today, but the YSA Dream Team, my superstars, my amazing faculty at Vielka's Young Singers Academy. And today we're going to talk about something because about a month ago, I was training one of my students to prepare for her upcoming auditions at an after-school program where they were going to be doing one of the many Broadway junior musicals. And in the process of preparing her, I realized after the auditions what I hadn't prepared her for and what I hadn't prepared her family for. And then I really was thinking about it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, even though I've been teaching for so long and teaching kids for so long and preparing for all kinds of auditions for so long, that I've really been so focused on the actual audition itself. Everything from walking into the door to the slate to the song to leaving the room and sort of, processing those feelings. And I felt like, I really was doing a lot around auditions. But what I hadn't really considered was everything that I already knew myself as a performer and as a voice teacher, having taken so many people through it, of what to expect. And what I mean is, what are the realistic expectations that are out there? In other words, is talent enough? That was one of the big questions that this mother posed to me afterwards, after they got the results of the casting. So then I realized, oh my gosh, there is so much to unpack here. And although, maybe there were tidbits here and there, I really started to think about a couple of things. One, really diving in with my amazing team to have a more rich conversation around this, which is what we're going to do today. And then to actually put together a resource for our families so that we can prepare them ahead of time for not just the audition, song, and process, but the extended process and conversation around it, which is really preparing for the casting. How is it that people cast? And I'm talking about school shows, after-school productions, pre-college, college conservatory, real world. There are predictable patterns here that I'm sure everyone in this room has experienced. And so I wanted to dig into that a little bit, what people's experience have been, where are the patterns that we see, and how can we help prepare our families for them? And how do we chart progress and feel like we're moving onward and upward when sometimes just the way it's sort of the game is played means that you're going to take a step forward and then a step back and then 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And it's not always going to be this linear line that you might go into the process thinking when you go in with the mindset of merit-based only. Because the reality is casting is so much bigger than that. Is talent enough? Real talk about auditions and casting. That's what we're going to dive into here today. And I'm so excited to introduce you to some of the members of our amazing Vielka's Young Singers Academy Dream Team. So we're going to start you off with Christina. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves, to tell you their name, a little bit about their own singing, voice teaching, and how long they've been on the team. Christina, take it away.
Hi, my name is Christina DeMaio, and I am from Connecticut. I am primarily a classical singer. That's how I trained, but these days I do a lot of contemporary singing as well, some folk music and things like that. I have been teaching kids since 2015, and I have been with Vielka's Young Singers Academy for 5 years now. So it's wonderful to be here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Julia Ann Cohen, and I'm from New York. I primarily sing musical theater, but my background's in classical music. And I've been teaching kids to sing for almost 9 years now, starting with group classes. And then I've been teaching private voice for 5 years. And I've been with YSA for almost 4 years now.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Baker, and I currently live in Jersey City, but I am from a very small town in Oklahoma, Bristow, Oklahoma, if you know of it. I am trained classically and have been teaching young singers for about 5 years. So excited to be with YSA now for 7 months and hopefully longer, and they love it here.
Awesome. Okay, I'm so excited to dive in. So, am I the only one in the room who sees predictable patterns with casting and auditions, especially, let's just say after school productions? Although I feel like it could be the school production, or, is there a predictable pattern? I'm seeing nodding heads. The reason that I want to make this more transparent is because I realized in speaking with this parent that they were so new to this, right? This was their first time in. They had no idea. And it really hit home that a lot of parents think, especially if it's a program that they're paying for, that their child is going to get a certain role or something. And that's really not how the game is played. So, what are some of the predictable patterns that you've seen?
I would say that one of the predictable patterns is there's always an element of seniority. So, for example, in school shows, let's say it's middle school, very rarely will a sixth grader be getting a lead role or even a supporting role over an eighth grader. And that's just sort of, the way that it goes. And even in outside of school context, sometimes there are students that have been in a program, let's say extracurricular youth theater program for a number of years, and so everybody on the other side of the table who has worked with those students and knows those students, what they can handle, what they're capable of, they've kind of worked their way up the ladder. They're just, generally going to be more inclined to kind of have that seniority, at least in the back of their minds when casting rolls around. So I would say that's definitely something that is always present.
And I guess we'll say if we now go to paid programs. I'll just say my own experience when I was younger, which I know these programs are still around and thriving. I went to one of the top musical theater summer programs and one of the top classical summer programs. And both of them have seniority in their own way. Either if you start doing the musical theater one for a few years, you'll start getting bigger roles. Might be ensemble to supporting to a lead, but it could take longer than that. And then for the classical one, it went very much more like no solos to solo to a bigger opera scene, etc. So the more years you did it, the more you would see solo performance in it. And it was seniority based, not talent based.
Yes, I agree. I think the directors base their knowledge on the students' experience, as both Christina and Julia have said. So maybe they're cast in the chorus first, and I think there's a natural ladder that is there just based off of the director or whoever is making those important decisions, their knowledge of their growth and their resilience in the roles that they have had in the past, and the talent that you come in with doesn't necessarily determine what role you get, which is a not sad, but it's something that you have to come to terms with, and it's hard to do.
And I'll just correct myself for 1 second. It's not that it's not talent based. Usually, whoever they cast are wonderful. I'll just say that. But just because you have talent, which I'm sure you do, doesn't mean that when you enter something in the first time that you will get that lead. So just want to put that there.
So, what do you say to your student? And there's going to be a range, right? So maybe let's start with the student who's just starting out. They're a beginner singer. They've signed up or they're in school and they're auditioning for their first show and they have high hopes. What do you say?
I often will remind my student that we can only control what we can control, meaning our preparation, our, mindset, all of those things that we work on in lessons to get them ready for the audition so that they can be as comfortable and confident as possible. They can feel that they did their best. And the rest is just frankly out of our hands. Again, we don't know what that director or music director's personal preferences or expectations are. We don't know all of those other factors that are taking place behind the scenes. But what we do know is how can we go in the room and, just represent ourselves as best as we can. And, so I think always bringing it back to that helps temper the expectation too, is that just because you give an amazing audition and just because you worked really hard and were really prepared, it doesn't always equate to the result that we want. So it keeps it a little bit more process oriented of like what are the things that we can celebrate that we've already done to put our best selves out there on that day. And sort of separating it from that, even though it's hard because we want one to equal the other, but yeah.
I was recently having this conversation with a family who they were auditioning for a show, and it was a first show. And I was telling them a little bit about my own experience because I was just with Broadway Asia doing The Sound of Music for a year on tour, and I was ensemble. And I understudied Mother Abbess, but I did ensemble for 160 performances. And I think that one of the goals of mine as a teacher, and I think this is a lot of our goals, is to celebrate the entire production, the entire part of the show. Without ensemble, we don't have a show. Without supporting, we don't have a show. Without crew, we don't have a show. I have a student who's doing crew this semester with their show. And without the full picture, there is no show. And I think it's important to realize how each role has a point. And without me in that show, it wouldn't have worked. And without you playing maybe a one line in a show, it wouldn't work without you. And I think it's important to share that and also to share your own experience, because of course I have played the lead, but when I booked a bigger production, as Vielka had said, I wasn't a lead anymore. And then I got a call back for a Broadway show, and it was even not an onstage role. It was an offstage swing. So it's interesting the progression as you do this, but it's common. And so I think it's important to share that with families and to celebrate it. And I think celebrating each role. And ensemble's fun, and some people make their entire career off ensemble. I think that's also important to share. And some people choose it. I sometimes would rather be ensemble, so yeah.
I think Christina sort of started with this as well, but I think the first thing that's most important, regardless of if the student has the lead role or is an ensemble or is in crew, whatever they have been cast as, or the role that they have, is to focus on what they are doing and celebrate everything that they have done to get to the point where they are, because it's really important that they go through these steps, and maybe during the audition, the ways that they felt, speaking about that, and the things that they learned are almost like their ticket to the better lead role that they will get in 2 months, 2 years, 5 years. I don't know how long it'll be, but all of those moments are amazing little wins to celebrate for the big moment eventually that will come, and it'll be fun regardless if it's the lead role or the best show that they've ever had, the best experience. I think just focusing on what they are doing and celebrating even today in rehearsal we did this, or I did better at this. That's making you a better musician and singer and preparing you for things ahead.
I love all these comments and a lot of the themes that are coming across, which are really around when you start with that first step. And the first step is always just a first baby step, and that's how it is. And then it's really about finding your personal best, and that's going to be unique to each person and to each student, and celebrating really the grit and courage that it takes, even if you don't get a part, to just go out for the audition. You have already prepared yourself, put yourself out there in so many ways that otherwise you wouldn't have been challenged, to do just in life. And I love that there's this idea around, rather than it just being sort of me centered, what's my part? Who am I? What did I get? That the longer you're in this, the more you're able to see and recognize, which is hard when you start. I don't think you really see it as much when you start, because you don't. All you see are the people who are the leads, right? They have the most time on stage, and it makes sense. That's what you see. But as you get into this work more and more, you realize that so many of the players behind the scenes are actually the ones who are in there the most. Not even on the stage. So it's really about this mindset of the entire production and everyone doing their best. Let's take a second and just go around and talk about sort of these different stages of, let's say you go out for the audition and you get nothing. What are some wins? What are some things to celebrate that maybe you've had as a personal experience, and how we can use that to share and encourage our singers, our students, and our families, to let them know that's part of this, that's part of the process. I mean, is there anybody in the room who has auditioned for something and always gotten it? Always gotten every audition? Absolutely not. But we don't talk about that as much out loud, right? So I think, let's talk about it for a second. What were the wins in going out for a part, for something, and not getting it? And how can we celebrate and find the wins and help our families do that?
I think one of the wins is audition experience in general. Auditioning is such a specific skill. And it's just one of those things that the more we do it, the easier it gets. And the more often we can put ourselves in a room and in that situation, the better, and just always again looking ahead, thinking of the larger journey of the next time an audition rolls around, it's going to be that little bit easier, and you're going to have learned a few little things from this last audition, that maybe we want to either improve upon or keep doing things that worked well. So I think that just that experience being the win overall.
Yeah, so I guess I'll talk more on like a musical theater basis, because each, classical is a different world, pop is a different world. But musical theater, the numbers of auditions that you do, it's a lot. So if I talk about myself, in the fall when I got back from tour, I did about 50 auditions in 2 months. And my goal was to book the callback. That was a big mind shift for me. It wasn't booking the show, it was booking the callback, because a lot of times you might have 4 callbacks. Who knows? And in all transparency, I didn't book a show in the fall, and that's okay. But I went to a lot of auditions. I booked quite a few callbacks I was excited about. I didn't book quite a few callbacks as well. But I realized for me, the win was I connected with new casting directors. And as Christina mentioned in a conversation before, I felt prepared. A win was I was prepared at, I will say, almost all of those auditions. I made some mistakes sometimes, but I was prepared. And that was a win for me, that I could go in there, be prepared, and I learned how to handle rejection in a different way. And so all those to me are wins. And my mind shift is you book the callback. That's the big thing. Book the callback. And when you're auditioning as an adult, or maybe not an adult, I guess we have, child actors, but auditioning means you're a working actor. And that was also a big mind shift for me. Doesn't mean that you have to be in a show, but if you're auditioning, you're a working actor. So.
I have a student right now. I'm thinking of him, extremely, extremely shy, and I just relate to that as a child, being really shy. I think the moment you realize your goal and then embark on the journey, in a way, is the most beneficial, the just amazing part, the best part in a way. I was thinking of some students I was working with yesterday, and they have the lead in their musical, and they just performed it. How did it go? And they say, oh, I loved working with everyone, and I loved sharing that experience with everyone. It's not that I loved singing my one song, it was the best part of every show. No, it's the whole journey that they enjoyed the most at the end. So I think sometimes that beginning part of stepping into the room, maybe you didn't get anything, but reflecting on it, of where you started to now. My student right now is wanting to spend a whole year to sort of get up that courage to get on stage, which I think is amazing. That this whole year, I think, will probably be the thing that he'll remember the most in the end, not maybe even the audition or the role that he got, but where he started, hopefully, until now, is the thing that is most important to remember. That these students now, at the end of their performance, they say, wow, that actually was the thing I enjoyed the most, which I think is great.
Thanks. I'm hearing, the experience from auditioning. I love the mindset of just getting the call back, and really just breaking it into steps, right? The fact that you're working at your craft and this is part of it, and I'm taking the step. And the very next step is all you can really do. You can't just go from here to, many steps later. It's always stepping, even when it seems like it's overnight. Is there really an overnight success? There's really not. There's really not. Even the ones that look like they are, you just haven't seen all the work that's been done in private. Maybe it wasn't as public. It's been happening, trust me. So, and especially with kids, even when it happens with kids and they're young and they're like, oh, they must be born that way. Or no, trust me, they have been putting in a ton of time. Let's talk really quickly, sort of rapid fire. What are the wins and things to get excited about if you are in the ensemble? And I'm bringing this up because a lot of times people have that lead role in mind, and then they get the ensemble and they're disappointed. But what are some things that we can share that we know about being in the ensemble, and what's there for us to celebrate and get excited about for them?
I love the idea of, especially what Julia was saying earlier, just kind of reframing ensemble in general. And it's really where we get to often do the most, like sometimes, especially in youth theater, maybe the leads really aren't dancing so much. Or let's say, you have a ton of costume changes and you're practicing what that's like to have a quick change, and you're in a lot of scenes, you have a lot of stage time, you get to sing a lot of numbers, like there's so much opportunity, I think, to build skills just being in the ensemble of a musical. And I also will say sometimes, especially if a student is new to a company, or it's their first time doing the school show, or they are one of the younger kids in the group, like, you go out there and be the best ensemble member you can be. We've all probably seen a show where our eyes are just glued to somebody in the ensemble who is just, so present, so engaged. They are just, giving all that they have. And I just think that it's such an opportunity to do that. Again, personal best, no matter where you are, the audience's eyes can still be drawn to you and your energy can be really infectious on stage. So
I guess what I'll say, sometimes when you're in the ensemble, you actually have more freedom because the attention from the director is not always on you. And so you actually get to create your own backstory a lot of the times. You get to use your imagination a little bit more, and it's fun. I've created like full worlds of my ensemble characters. I've created names. In The Sound of Music, I was Carol. There's no Carol in The Sound of Music, but I was Carol. So it's fun. And I think there's a way of being an artist that lets you be a little bit more individual and your choices are unique. And that's really great. So to me, it's interesting. And I think that is a nice vision as we get cast as ensemble.
Yeah, very quickly, rapid fire. I love that Juliet, like sort of less stress, more fun, and like learning harmonies and helping others around you. I think are just amazing things to celebrate when being in the ensemble as well.
How about quickly, same idea around sort of the character roles or maybe the supporting roles, not the lead, but the roles that are sort of in between the ensemble and the leads.
I'm reminded of, I have a student who just kind of longs to be a tenor, and he's a baritone, and I know why he wants to be a tenor, to kind of have those leading man roles, the romantic lead, whatever. But so often we look at the shows that we're auditioning for or that are coming up, and the more interesting, more layered characters are typically those, kind of secondary character roles, the comic relief, the villains, like just so many different opportunities to have different arcs, different emotional journeys. So I always encourage, just like, that character has, again, just as much potential to steal the show, so to speak, as a typical lead.
Yeah, I'll just add in a lot of the times the supporting the feature, those roles get the biggest applause on their number because they're there for that reason. And you get that applause and then you get to go to your dressing room. So it's kind of amazing.
I love this. I think I was in a performance of a supporting role, and it was so much fun to see the lead sort of next to you and encourage and sort of share that bond. I guess the word supporting drew that to mind of being in a position where seeing others shine and then getting that little moment and just having fun playing off of each other, and as well in the back of your mind thinking, oh, I'm kind of glad I don't have that large tenor solo like Christina was saying, or the love interest role, because I get to live in this more comfortable, fun place. And again, maybe at the end of the experience, you can really appreciate those types of things. So if you do book a supporting or character role, that's nice to know beforehand or to share with your students that you know they're going to have a great time.
Yeah, so part of what I'm hearing in just analyzing the supporting characters and the ensemble is that really there's a pattern that happens in almost every type of show, right? And I think we know this as performers. And again, this is its own conversation that we could have just around, there's an opening, there is a closing, there are these high energy moments, and then there's going to be tension that gets built, there's going to be tension that needs to be released. and that there's sort of a predictable pattern from the beginning to the end of almost any show that you think about. And so as a result, we have these different types of roles that were being cast. And when we come to the leading roles, tell me the pros and the cons of the leading roles.
I'm thinking I'm going to go straight to a con, actually. And I'm just thinking of our students today who have a lot of pressures, a lot of overscheduling, a lot of, you know, I see so much, perfectionism in my students, and it's a big emotional labor, and a mental labor to kind of have that big of a responsibility. And I think you really want to be ready for it when it comes along. And even if, again, if we're thinking about talent and merit based, your student might be out singing and out dancing everyone and could earn that lead based on talent, right? We have to really look at the bigger picture of what they are ready for and how are they going to have the best experience and the most positive experience when that time comes along for them. So, I know from working in youth theater and being behind the table, there's been so many times where my personal students maybe were just so close to getting something, or just, it didn't work out for them for that particular show. And, I'm always bummed. But then I again think big picture and think, that might have been too much for her right now. And I don't know if she would have enjoyed it as much as maybe if she gets there next year or the year after that and gets a little bit more time in ensemble or in a secondary role, a little more confidence building. So I think really looking at, kind of the stress that can come from it, and the expectations of being around your peers, all of those things, and just really wanting a student to be in a place where they can thrive in that situation.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with the con as well. You don't get as much time off stage with your colleagues or your peers, and that's sometimes sad because yeah, you might get more solo stage time, but the real experience of the show, like Caitlin was saying, is, oh my gosh, I miss the people so much. I miss the community. And that usually is formed off stage, actually. So I think that is the con of being the lead. The pro is if you're ready, like Christina said, for this, you have the opportunity to lead not only in the show, but you are usually the one that people look up to. So you have the opportunity to set an example, and that's really exciting. So I think that when you're a lead, that not only do you get to share your talent, but you get to shape yourself as a human in a really interesting way. So that's what I always found the first time I was a lead. I realized how much that's important to be someone that people look up to.
I think I would just really quickly wanted to jump in with the understudy of the lead and the disappointment that I've seen singers who get that understudy role. And I think, oh, that's amazing that you have the understudy. You have that almost as a director who's cast certain musicals before. When you cast that understudy, you know they're going to be prepared. Or hopefully that's their role, is to be over prepared and take the place of the lead if that hopefully that doesn't happen. But I always think those understudies are carrying the performance in a lot of ways, and they don't always understand how big of a role they hold. So that I guess con of being the lead would be knowing when to balance. Yes, I'm on stage all the time. I need to rest. I need to take this responsibility of being an example. That's hard to do, to know the balance of that. And having an understudy is nice to if needed, have someone to fall back on, and that role is so important. So I think if anyone gets that understudy role, it's almost in a way more important that they are up to the task in a minute's notice to get on stage.
I think what we're talking about here is that there's a lot of responsibility that comes with these roles. And, Julia, hearing you talk about the lead being a model, I think what you're really talking about here is that the leads can really set the tone for the work ethic that goes on, right? Um, and so much of that work ethic is the idea of the ensemble, especially when you're the lead. So let me say that again. When you're the lead, the real pros are thinking about the ensemble. And what I mean about that when I say that is that it takes the whole, and that you usually gain that appreciation of the whole, of everyone's role being extremely important once you have been in this for a while and get to know what it feels like to be in a show. Understand that almost family like bonding that comes because you are placing your trust. And to be on stage in front of an audience with hundreds of people, maybe, and you're depending on everyone to show up and do their job. Let me tell you that one line. I was in a show once, someone had one line in the show, and that one person didn't show up. And there we were, out on stage, improvising, wondering, when's this person going to show up? Because it was hard to improvise around it. We really needed that one line to move the show forward. And that's the reality of how much responsibility and meaning there is for every part. So, yeah, really taking that to heart and becoming your best. I want to just quickly mention that I've seen an Tada Youth Theater Ensemble here in New York. Nina Trevins is the executive and producing artistic director, and it's really the most amazing ensemble I've seen of youth. They're so professional. And this group they've done talkbacks after the show. So it's all kids. They're doing this amazing, usually original productions, musicals that are written for them. And at the end of the show, sometimes they will have like question and answer with the audience and talk back. And what's really apparent is that this group of kids really understand that they're all in it together. And because it's such a unique place where that ensemble stays together over many years, they have the opportunity to see each person cycle through different parts. Sometimes they're in the ensemble, sometimes it's supporting, sometimes it's a lead, sometimes they're doing something backstage, that they really get a sense of, oh, it takes a family. And if we're just casting ourselves almost mentality, that they can better see, like, oh, I see why this person deserves to have the lead this time, or it's a different way of thinking that evolves with time and practice. So I think that's a really big one. As we start to wrap up, I want to just hit on a couple important points before we go really fast off the top of your head. What are factors other than your own personal performing skills that get called into the larger world of being cast?
Sometimes age
Vocal range of a character.
or physicality.
And hopefully we're getting more away from the idea of type, but I think that it still exists to a degree, right? Of there are just some things, some roles, some shows that really kind of just lend themselves to again that maybe a specific physicality or a specific quality.
For me, Hamilton on Broadway was like the most changing the landscape, show, in that it really broke the mold of traditional casting, which had already been in motion for some time, but that really just took it out there. Okay, then it's like diversity becomes more important. So there's all kinds of reasons, from your physical appearance to who the casting side is, what's their personal preference, what are they going for this time around, who's there? Who do they already know as opposed to the new people? Because part of it is that work ethic. So do I know that this person's going to really, show up, be responsible, have all the other parts of the job? Because let's face it, just being, early and on time is a huge thing. If you are somebody who shows up a few minutes late, that's extremely problematic in this business, right? Nobody's going to want to work with you. So it's these teeny tiny details that are off most people's radar when they're preparing for an audition that can make or break it. There's so many other factors, and we could go on, but just to give you an idea. And then finally, the emotions. And I know there are so many emotions that come up, and we're going to be sad. We're going to be sad. We're going to have kids that are sad, our students, our families who are disappointed, who have given their all. So what can we say to them as we think about going onward and upward in those moments where we're really trying to process?
Oh, I think validating the disappointment is so important, and I'll often like give an anecdote, of just like, oh, pining away for a role or just like, there's just always going to be that disappointment and heartbreak that is a part of this. But I think how we respond to it is really like the character building moment, right? Of do we keep going? Do we get even more fire underneath us to make these things happen in the future? Do we keep working? Or do we let it defeat us and discourage us? And it's okay for it to happen for a little bit, but really just kind of keeping things moving and always on to the next, onward and upward.
I give myself like a 24-hour four-wall rule. So I can, and I tell my students this, it's feel your emotions. It's important, especially if you go into this career, to be in check with your emotions, and your mental health is part of it. And so feel those emotions. My four-wall rule is you don't go and say mean things about others, because it's important to celebrate others. Just like if you were in that situation getting the lead and someone didn't get something, you celebrate. Just because you didn't get something doesn't mean you didn't get it because of the other person. It's not that. It's really not a competition as much as we might think it is. It's really not. There's so many other factors. So we still can celebrate someone else and be sad. You can do both. So I think for me, that's important. And I tell my students that as well. I even had that with a student yesterday who in the practice-based challenge didn't get the top 2. And I was like, oh my gosh, how do I say this quickly? And I go, but isn't this an opportunity to celebrate that student this week? And they were like, oh, wow, let's celebrate them. So just have that mind shift and feel your emotion, but celebrate.
Yeah, I love that. I just wanted to say lots of love and encouragement and saying, I see you. I've been there. It's okay to be sad. And hopefully the relationship you've built with them over lessons, years, or 2 days, I don't know, they're comfortable sharing those emotions with you, feeling them, talking about them. And then after that release of sharing it, like Christina said, that fire hopefully will build back up and you'll be even stronger for the next audition you have.
Yeah, I love this. Thank you so much for having this conversation. I'm so excited that we're making a lot of this transparent, that we're making the conversation bigger than it has been in the past. I know in my own practice, I want to put together an actual physical resource to give to our families that I'll share with everyone once I have it together. And it really is ultimately for me about learning how to be your best self, right? And it's an ongoing practice. And that whether you win or lose, there really is no win or lose, that's like a model we can kind of put aside and just find the win-wins, which is really that I'm always constantly practicing, I'm getting better, I'm learning from those around me, and that it is about having that grit, that endurance, that focus on making yourself better, and the comebacks, right? The comebacks rather than the setbacks. Like that discipline in those moments is what actually makes you grow, not just getting the thing. I mean, there's growth in that, but the times that are toughest, that's when you can learn the most and be really your best self and train for that. So thank you all so much for being here, and I will see you soon. Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you for joining me for this podcast. To learn more about my step-by-step approach to voice education, where I've consolidated 30 years of vocal study into 4 words even a 3-year-old can do, just go to www.vielka.com. That's Vielka.com. Happy singing.